I am Ethan, 34 years old. Exactly 1 year ago, on a cold Thanksgiving evening, my wife of 5 years smiled at me from across a sprawling mahogany dining table, told me she loved me, and then casually slipped a lethal dose of poison into my bowl of chicken noodle soup. While I was fighting for my life, surviving 6 months of agonizing, unexplained illness, her family sat around drinking expensive imported wine paid for entirely by my hard-earned salary. They mocked my working-class background. My own brother-in-law looked at me sweating and shivering in my own home, and joked that guys from my neighborhood just didn't have the stomach for high society. They laughed at me in front of 12 people. But there was one thing they didn't know. They didn't know I saw her do it. They didn't know I had the evidence tucked away, the patience of a saint, and a brilliant lawyer waiting in the wings. And right now, they are the ones rotting in a concrete cell, begging for a mercy they never once showed me. Before I tell you exactly what happened that night and how I brought an entire empire of lies crashing down, please hit that like button if you believe in absolute justice. And don't forget to let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Your support means everything to me. Now, let us go back to the moment my entire world shattered. The dining room was heavy with the rich, savory scent of roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and the famous chicken noodle soup my mother-in-law, Margaret, insisted on serving as a starter for every single holiday. The crystal wine glasses clinked in a constant, grating rhythm. The warm, amber lighting of the massive crystal chandelier cast soft, flattering shadows over the faces of my wife's family. On the surface, it looked like a scene pulled straight from a luxury real estate magazine. My wife, Clara, sat to my left. She looked absolutely radiant. She wore a deep emerald green silk blouse that I had bought her for her birthday, her blonde hair perfectly styled. I looked down at my phone for a fraction of a second. I was expecting an email regarding a major promotion at my architectural firm, a promotion I had been working 80-hour weeks to secure just to keep up with Clara's spending habits. When I looked back up, the chandelier light caught the movement of her hand. I watched her perfectly manicured fingers hover directly over my steaming bowl of soup. It happened incredibly fast, but in my mind, time dilated. Her thumb flicked against her index finger. A tiny, almost invisible cascade of fine, white powder fell straight into my golden broth. She immediately dropped her hand to her lap, hiding it beneath the heavy linen tablecloth, and turned to her father, Arthur. She let out a bright, melodic laugh at a joke he had just made about his latest corporate lawsuit. My heart completely stopped. The blood roared in my ears so loudly I thought the massive glass windows of the dining room would shatter. I froze. I did not blink. I stared at the dark surface of the soup. The powder had vanished instantly. It melted into the boiling heat, leaving absolutely no trace. "Ethan, darling," Clara said, her voice dripping with that manufactured, sugary sweetness she always weaponized around her wealthy parents. "Eat up, sweetheart. You've been looking so terribly pale and sickly lately. Mom made this just for you to build your strength back up." I looked slowly into her eyes. They were wide, icy blue, and completely empty of human empathy. There was a cold, calculating anticipation waiting in them. She wanted me to lift the silver spoon. She was waiting for me to take the first bite. My hands rested flat on my thighs under the table. I gripped the fabric of my trousers until my knuckles ached with the strain. If I screamed, if I flipped the mahogany table, I would be the crazy one. They would call me paranoid. They would say it was just salt or pepper. I had no proof, only my own 2 eyes. "I need to use the restroom," I said. My voice sounded entirely foreign, flat, hollow, and devoid of emotion. I stood up abruptly. Clara's jaw tightened for a microscopic second, a flash of irritation that I was delaying her grand finale. I did not wait for her response. I turned my back to the table, walked down the long hardwood hallway, and locked myself in the downstairs guest bathroom. I gripped the edges of the cold marble sink, staring at my pale, terrified reflection in the mirror. I was a dead man walking in my own house. I splashed freezing cold water onto my face, forcing the panic down into the pit of my stomach. I had to be smarter than them. I had to survive this dinner. I stayed in that bathroom for exactly 3 agonizing minutes. I forced myself to regulate my breathing, counting inhaling and exhaling until the violent shaking in my hands subsided. I dried my face with a monogrammed hand towel, staring at the embroidered C for Caldwell. Felt like a brand on my skin. When I walked back into the dining room, the conversation was booming. Julian, Clara's older brother, the undisputed golden child of the family, was loudly bragging about his new Porsche and complaining about the strict regulations of his neighborhood HOA meetings. His 2 small children were running chaotic laps around the table, screaming and knocking into the heavy wooden chairs. My bowl of soup sat exactly where I had left it. Steam still curled lazily off the surface, inviting and deadly. Margaret, my mother-in-law, stood up at the head of the table. "I need to check the roast in the oven," she announced, wiping her hands on an apron she wore over her designer dress. She turned her back to the dining room and walked into the massive, open-concept kitchen. At that exact second, Julian's youngest kid tripped over the edge of the Persian rug and face planted onto the hardwood floor, letting out an ear-piercing wail. Clara jumped out of her seat, turning completely away from me to rush over and coddle her niece. Julian and Arthur leaned over, totally distracted by the crying child. Every single pair of eyes was off me. The universe had handed me a window of roughly 4 seconds. I did not think. I just moved. I reached across the corner of the table. I grabbed my bowl with my right hand and Margaret's untouched bowl with my left. I slid my poisoned soup directly onto Margaret's expensive placemat. I pulled her clean soup right in front of me. The ceramic bowls were identical. The volume of the broth was identical. The swap was utterly silent, masked by the screaming child. I picked up my heavy silver spoon just as Clara turned back around, patting the crying child's head. She settled back into her chair, smoothing her silk blouse, and glanced sideways at me. I scooped a generous spoonful of the clean soup, blew on it casually, and put it in my mouth. I swallowed, making sure she saw my throat move. "Wow," I said, looking directly into Clara's eyes. "This really is incredible. So comforting." Clara's stiff shoulders dropped an entire inch. A genuine smile of deep, twisted, sickening relief spread across her face. "I am so glad, honey. Please eat it all." Margaret walked back into the dining room from the kitchen, taking off her apron and tossing it over a chair. "The roast needs another 20 minutes, she declared, taking her seat at the head of the table. She looked down at the bowl in front of her. The bowl that was meant for me. The bowl carrying a death sentence. She picked up her spoon. Clara was casually pouring herself a glass of sparkling water. She glanced over at her mother out of the corner of her eye. The glass stopped midway to her lips. Clara's eyes went incredibly wide. She realized exactly what she was looking at. The placement of the spoon was different. The slightly altered angle of the linen napkin next to the bowl. I had been careful, but a murderer knows her own trap. Margaret raised the spoon to her mouth. "Mom, wait!" Clara's voice cracked like a whip. It was loud, sharp, laced with genuine, unfiltered panic. Margaret paused, the silver spoon touching her bottom lip. She frowned, looking at her daughter. "What is it, Clara? Is something wrong with the soup?" Clara was trembling. Her knuckles turned stark white around the water glass. I watched the gears grind violently in her head. If she stopped her mother from eating, she would have to explain why the soup was dangerous. She would have to confess to attempting to poison her husband in front of the entire family. "Mom, don't," Clara whispered, her voice barely carrying over the table. But Margaret just rolled her eyes, scoffing dismissively. "Oh, hush, Clara. I am absolutely starving," she said, and swallowed the broth. Clara slammed her glass down on the table, spilling ice water across the pristine linen tablecloth. I sat back in my chair, perfectly still, a calm spectator to the nightmare she had built. The trap had snapped shut, and she had just caught her own mother. "I need you to deeply understand how we got to this dining table." I need you to know the absolute hell I was living in before that night, to understand why I didn't just jump up and scream for the police. I grew up with absolutely nothing. My parents worked grueling factory jobs in Ohio, breaking their backs just to keep the lights on. I paid my own way through college, working night shifts at a dirty 24-hour diner to get my architecture degree. When I met Clara, I thought I had stepped into a fairy tale. She was beautiful, polished, well-spoken, and came from a family of immense generational wealth. Or so I thought. Arthur and Margaret never liked me. From day one, I was just the blue-collar kid who managed to trick their princess. When we got married, I worked 80-hour weeks at my firm to provide the lavish life she demanded. I paid the massive mortgage on our 4-bedroom house. I funded her exclusive country club memberships. I put every single dime of my salary into our joint accounts so she never had to feel like she lacked anything her parents could have given her. Her family treated me like the hired help. During family gatherings, Julian would casually ask me if I could look at a leak in his roof or fix his plumbing, laughing with his father about how handy people of my background were. They flaunted their wealth constantly, talking loudly about their stock portfolios, their commercial real estate investments, and the massive inheritance Julian was set to receive. I swallowed my pride. I took the humiliation. I loved my wife. I thought naively that she loved me. But looking back with clear eyes, there were always massive red flags. The constant, nagging complaints about my working hours, followed immediately by demands for a $50,000 kitchen remodel or a new luxury SUV. The way she would belittle my job as drawing little pictures, while happily spending the money those pictures earned. I never wanted a divorce. I firmly believed in the vows we took at the altar. Even when I started feeling like an uninvited guest in my own home, I just pushed myself harder. I thought if I finally landed a senior partnership at the firm, if I finally brought home enough money to rival Arthur, he would respect me and Clara would finally be happy. I was a fool, a dedicated, blind, hard-working fool who was digging his own grave to pay for his wife's lifestyle. About 6 months before that Thanksgiving dinner, my body started breaking down in terrifying ways. It started with headaches, a dull, heavy, throbbing pain at the base of my skull that simply would not go away with over-the-counter painkillers. I chalked it up to extreme stress. I was managing 3 major commercial projects, staring at glowing blueprints until 2 in the morning every single night. Then came the crippling nausea. I would wake up in a cold, drenched sweat, my stomach rolling violently. There was a constant, bitter metallic taste in my mouth, like I had been chewing on dirty pennies. I started dropping weight rapidly. My hands would shake so badly during important client presentations that I had to keep them shoved deep in my pockets to hide the tremors. I went to my primary care doctor. He ran extensive blood tests, checked my blood pressure, and confidently told me I was suffering from severe exhaustion and a potential bleeding ulcer. He told me to rest, to step back from work. Suddenly, Clara transformed. She became the perfect, doting wife. It was the most attention she had paid me in 4 years. She insisted on managing my diet entirely. Every single evening when I came home exhausted and shivering, she would be waiting in the kitchen. She would hand me a steaming hot cup of herbal tea or a bowl of dark, rich soup. "Drink it all, Ethan," she would say softly, standing directly over me, watching with intense focus until I swallowed the very last drop. "It is a special organic blend. My mother's old recipe for a weak stomach." I drank it. I thanked her for it. But every time I drank it, I felt exponentially worse the next day. My vision started blurring, gray spots dancing at the edge of my sight. My chest felt incredibly tight, a heavy, crushing pressure right over my heart. One night, I woke up gasping for air, my heart hammering a terrifying, erratic rhythm against my ribs. I grabbed my chest, genuinely panicking, thinking I was having a heart attack at 34. Clara woke up next to me, turned on the bedside lamp, and gently stroked my sweaty hair. "It's just a panic attack, sweetie," she cooed softly. "You are working yourself into an early grave." She had smiled when she said it. I did not realize until much later how horrifyingly literal she was being. She wasn't nursing me back to health. She was methodically building up a fatal tolerance of poison in my system, watching me wither away right in front of her. The absolute turning point happened just 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. I was at the office. My vision was swimming, and I needed to urgently pay a contractor for a home repair we had done on the roof. I logged into our joint banking portal. I usually never checked the balances. I just deposited my massive paychecks and let Clara handle all the household finances, trusting her completely. My stomach completely dropped. The account, which should have had well over $100,000, was nearly empty. There was barely $2,000 left. I frantically clicked through the transaction history. There were massive, unexplainable wire transfers and cash withdrawals. $5,000 here, $10,000 there. The money I had meticulously set aside for our future children's college fund. Completely wiped out. My annual holiday bonus from the firm. Gone within 3 days of deposit. I called my assistant, Sarah. She was sharp, intensely loyal, and practically ran my professional life. I asked her to help me quietly audit my own personal accounts behind closed doors. We spent 3 agonizing hours digging through the digital paper trail. Clara had been funneling money out of our accounts for almost 8 months. She was transferring it to a private offshore account I knew absolutely nothing about. Furthermore, she had been racking up massive, high-interest credit card debts under my name. We were talking about over $200,000 in debt. When I confronted Clara that evening in our living room, she immediately burst into theatrical tears. She collapsed onto the sofa, claiming she had developed a severe shopping and spending addiction because I was never home. She violently blamed me for neglecting her emotionally. She promised she was seeing a therapist and taking a high-end cooking class to focus her energy on being a better wife. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to save my marriage. But the heavy seed of doubt was firmly planted in my mind. I started paying close attention to her habits. I noticed her phone was always placed face down on tables. I noticed she suddenly changed her lock screen password. And one night, when she was in the shower, her phone lit up brightly on the nightstand. A text message from her best friend, Sylvia. Did you get the signature on the paperwork yet? Time is running out. They are going to collect. I didn't know what paperwork Sylvia was talking about. I didn't know who was going to collect. But connecting the timeline in the dark, I realized my severe physical symptoms started the exact same week my bank account started hemorrhaging money. The fake cooking classes coincided perfectly with my absolute worst days of sickness. I wasn't just losing my money. I was being systematically bled dry, physically and financially, by the woman sleeping next to me. Back at the dining table, the air felt suffocating. I watched the gold second hand on the antique grandfather clock in the corner of the room. It was exactly 6:42 p.m. Minute 1. Margaret wiped her mouth delicately with her linen napkin, completely oblivious to the poison coursing through her veins. Clara sat rigidly frozen, staring intensely at her mother, her face the color of wet ash. Arthur was loudly pouring more expensive wine into his glass. Julian was aggressively cutting up turkey for his screaming kids. The aggressive normality of the room felt like a psychological horror movie. Minute 3. Margaret unbuttoned the top button of her designer dress, her face flushing a deep, unnatural red. "Is it terribly warm in here, Arthur?" she asked, fanning her face frantically with her hand. "Feels fine to me, Maggie," Arthur mumbled, chewing a large piece of bread and ignoring her. Clara's breathing became incredibly shallow and fast. She looked at me, her eyes darting frantically, then back at her mother. She was trapped in a cage of her own making. She knew exactly what her mother had ingested, but warning her meant confessing to attempted murder in front of the entire family. She made her choice. She chose her own survival over her mother's life. She kept her mouth shut. Minute 5. Margaret's hand trembled violently as she reached across the table for her crystal water glass. Her fingers spasmed. The glass slipped from her grip, crashing and shattering loudly against the hardwood floor. Ice and water exploded everywhere. The loud crash instantly silenced the chaotic room. "Mom," Julian asked, standing up and dropping his knife. Are you okay? I feel very strange, Margaret gasped. Her skin was suddenly slick with a cold, terrifying sweat. Her lips were turning a faint, horrifying shade of blue. She pressed both hands flat against the table, trying desperately to push herself up, her arms shaking under her own weight. Minute 6. Margaret's knees buckled completely. She let out a horrific, guttural gasp for air, clutching her chest tightly, as if her heart were trying to burst through her ribs. Her eyes rolled back into her head, exposing the whites. "Maggie!" Arthur screamed, his heavy chair falling backward with a loud crash as he rushed around the table to catch her. Minute 7. Margaret collapsed heavily onto the floor, completely unresponsive. The dining room erupted into absolute, deafening chaos. Julian was screaming at his wife to get the kids out of the room immediately. Arthur was on his knees, shaking his wife violently, yelling her name over and over. Clara let out a blood-curdling scream and threw herself onto the floor next to her mother, sobbing hysterically and tearing at her own hair. I sat perfectly still in my chair. I did not move a single muscle. I just watched her perform. It was an absolute masterclass in deception. A flawless performance of grief from the exact woman who had just served the executioner's meal. "Call 911. Are you stupid?" Julian roared at me, his face purple with rage. "I'm on it," I said calmly, pulling out my phone, my hands completely steady. The paramedics arrived in under 10 agonizing minutes. They swarmed the dining room with their heavy equipment, pushing Arthur out of the way, hooking Margaret up to portable EKG monitors, checking her non-existent pulse, and shining bright lights into her unresponsive eyes. "Suspected sudden cardiac arrest," one paramedic shouted over the noise. "We need to move her now. What did she eat? Any known allergies? Is she on any daily medications?" Arthur was hyperventilating, completely unable to form a coherent sentence. Julian was pacing furiously, cursing at the paramedics to move faster. Clara was weeping dramatically into her hands, burying her face in Arthur's shoulder. They loaded Margaret onto a stretcher, strapped her down, and rushed her out the front door, the red and blue ambulance lights flashing through the dining room windows. Arthur and Clara jumped into the back of the ambulance. Julian grabbed his car keys from the counter to follow them in his Porsche. "I'll stay behind and clean up," I told Julian as he ran past me. "I'll lock up the house securely and meet you all at the hospital." He didn't even look at me. He just bolted out the door, the engine of his car roaring to life a second later. The moment the heavy front door slammed shut, the silence in the house was absolutely deafening. I didn't waste a single second. I walked quickly into the kitchen and found a box of heavy-duty, sealable Ziploc bags under the sink. I pulled on a pair of thick rubber dishwashing gloves. I went back into the ruined dining room. I took Margaret's bowl, the one she had eaten from, the one that was supposed to kill me. There was still a quarter of the deadly broth left at the bottom. I carefully poured the remaining liquid into a thick plastic food container and sealed the lid incredibly tight. I bagged the empty ceramic bowl itself. I bagged the silver spoon she used. I even bagged my own bowl and spoon, just in case they needed a control sample. I wiped down the table thoroughly, clearing away any obvious signs of a crime scene so Clara wouldn't realize I had taken the evidence when she returned. I packed the sealed bags securely into my leatherwork briefcase. Then, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 2 full years. My older brother, Marcus. We had a bitter falling out over a stupid argument years ago, but he was a senior toxicologist at a state medical lab. He was brilliant, and he was the only person in the world I could trust right now. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Ethan? It's Thanksgiving, man. What's wrong?" "Marcus, I need your help. Right now. It's a matter of absolute life and death. I have a biological food sample. I need you to run a full, comprehensive toxicology screen on it immediately. Everything you can find. Heavy metals, prescription drugs, exotic poisons. Everything." There was a heavy pause on the line. "Ethan, what the hell are you involved in? Did someone get hurt?" "My mother-in-law is in an ambulance fighting for her life," I said, my voice cold as ice. But the food was meant for me. I'll be at your lab in 20 minutes. Do not tell anyone. The emergency waiting room at Memorial Hospital smelled strongly of bleach, sterile alcohol, and stale coffee. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed aggressively overhead. I walked through the sliding doors, clutching my leather briefcase tightly to my chest. I had already dropped the samples off to Marcus in the underground parking lot. Arthur was sitting slumped in a cheap plastic chair, staring blankly at the white wall. Clara was pacing the linoleum floor, aggressively gnawing on her fingernails. When she saw me walk in, she rushed over and threw her arms tightly around my neck, sobbing violently into my chest. "Ethan, I'm so scared," she cried, her fake tears soaking the fabric of my shirt. She was perfectly fine. We were just laughing. I don't understand what happened. I wrapped my arms slowly around her. I patted her back mechanically. My face was a mask of absolute stone. I could smell the expensive, heavy perfume on her neck, the exact same perfume she wore while attempting to murder me just over an hour ago. Julian stormed out of the emergency room double doors, his face bright red with unchecked fury. He marched straight up to me and shoved me hard in the chest with both hands. "This is your fault," he spat, pointing a shaking finger directly in my face. "She was fine until she ate that damn soup. Did you leave something out on the counter? Did you use bad chicken? You're practically useless. Ethan, you poison everything you touch." I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I just looked him dead in the eyes. "Julian, your mother made the soup. She served it, not me." Before Julian could swing his fists at me, the double doors swung open and Dr. Eris, Margaret's longtime, highly respected cardiologist, walked out. He looked incredibly grim, holding a clipboard. "Arthur," the doctor said softly. Arthur stood up, his entire body trembling. "We have managed to stabilize her, but it was incredibly close. She is in a medically induced coma. Her heart suffered a massive, catastrophic shock. Frankly, her symptoms mimic acute chemical poisoning." The word hung heavily in the sterile air. Poisoning. "Poisoning?" Arthur gasped, clutching his chest. "From food? Like food poisoning?" "We are running a full toxicology panel right now," Dr. Eris said, refusing to meet Arthur's eyes. "We will know more by morning." But this was not ordinary food poisoning. Clara swayed heavily on her feet. She looked like she was genuinely going to vomit. She excused herself, claiming she desperately needed to use the restroom to wash her face. I watched her walk away, but she didn't go to the restroom. She walked quickly toward the secluded vending machines, pulled out her phone, and frantically started texting someone. I stepped silently behind a concrete pillar, completely out of sight. I watched her thumbs fly across the glowing screen. Her face was twisted in absolute, undeniable panic. She wasn't acting like a grieving daughter praying for her mother. She was acting like a terrified criminal whose perfect cover was blown. She was texting her accomplice, trying to figure out how to stop the hospital from finding out what she used. They kept Margaret in the intensive care unit overnight. Around 2 a.m., Arthur, completely exhausted and weeping, told Clara and me to go home and get some rest. He would stay in the uncomfortable chair by his wife's side. The dark drive back to our house was suffocating. Clara stared blankly out the passenger window, chewing her lip until a thin line of blood appeared. She didn't say a single word. When we finally got back to the house, she immediately went upstairs, locked herself inside the master bathroom, and took a heavy prescription sleeping pill. 20 minutes later, I heard her snoring softly in our bed. I did not sleep. I didn't even take my shoes off. I walked quietly down the hall and went straight into her home office. I locked the heavy wooden door behind me. I sat down at her pristine, organized desk and opened her laptop. I knew her password, the name of her childhood golden retriever. She was arrogant enough to never bother changing it on the main computer. I opened her email application. I completely bypassed her cluttered inbox and went straight to the deleted folder. I spent an hour recovering permanently deleted items. And there it was. the horrific puzzle pieces snapping together with terrifying, undeniable clarity. There were dozens of automated emails from an illegal, offshore high-stakes gambling site. Clara had not just developed a minor shopping addiction at the mall. She had a severe, uncontrollable gambling problem. She had lost over $200,000 playing high-stakes online poker and blackjack. There were vicious, threatening emails from loan sharks demanding immediate repayment, threatening to come to our house. But that wasn't the smoking gun. That was just the motive. The smoking gun was a long, hidden email thread with a man named Liam. Liam was the wealthy family's senior financial advisor. He was also a guy I occasionally played golf with, a guy I trusted with my retirement funds. Attached to the email was a highly confidential PDF document. I opened it, my hands shaking. It was a massive life insurance policy taken out on my life, finalized exactly 6 months ago, right around the exact time my terrible physical symptoms started. The base payout was $1 million. But there was a specific, underlined accidental death clause. If I died of unnatural causes, sudden cardiac arrest or accidental poisoning, the payout instantly doubled. $2 million tax-free. Clara was listed as the sole, uncontested beneficiary. Liam had orchestrated the entire policy behind my back, bypassing the usual rigorous medical checks by using his firm's leverage and forging my digital signature. And the tone of their emails wasn't professional. They were sickeningly intimate. Hold on a little longer, babe. Once he eats it and is out of the picture, we collect the cash and we are clear to leave. My wife wasn't just trying to kill me to pay off her massive debts. She was trying to murder me so she could run away with our financial advisor and $2 million of blood money. I plugged in an encrypted flash drive and meticulously downloaded every single email, every PDF, every bank statement, and every insurance document. I had her. I had them both. I sat motionless in the dark office until the pale morning sun started to rise, casting long shadows across the floor. My mind was crystal clear, sharper than it had ever been in my life. The betrayal was so absolute, so incredibly deep, that I had completely moved past the agonizing pain and straight into a cold, terrifying, calculating rage. At exactly 6 a.m., my phone vibrated violently against the wooden desk. It was Marcus. I answered it immediately, pressing the phone to my ear. "Tell me you have something." Marcus sounded completely exhausted, his voice raspy. "Ethan, whatever is going on, you need to leave that house and go to the police right now. I ran the mass spectrometry on the broth." "What exactly did you find?" I asked, my voice steady and completely void of emotion. "Digitalis," Marcus said. "A massive, lethal concentration of digitalis." I frowned, staring at the wall. "What is that? A rat poison?" "No. It's a highly restricted cardiac glycoside. It's derived from the foxglove plant. In very small, strictly controlled doses, it's used as a prescription medication for severe heart failure. But in the dose I found concentrated in this soup, it's a literal chemical weapon. It induces violent arrhythmias, intense nausea, vision loss, and eventually, a massive, unstoppable heart attack. It builds up slowly in the heart tissue over time. If someone has been giving this to you slowly over months, my blood ran ice cold in my veins. The severe nausea, the blurred vision, the terrifying heart palpitations in the middle of the night that Clara called a panic attack. "It wasn't an accident," Marcus continued, his voice tight with genuine fear for my life. "Someone ground down a massive amount of prescription pills and dumped them directly into that specific bowl. If you had eaten that, Ethan, you would be dead on a slab in the county morgue right now." "I need the official lab report, Marcus. Signed, stamped, and legally certified. I'm encrypting it and emailing it to you right now. Ethan, please, I'm begging you, call the cops." "Not yet," I said. "I need one more thing before I strike." I hung up the phone. Digitalis, a heart medication. I walked out of the office and silently down the carpeted hall to the guest bathroom. The specific bathroom Clara's parents exclusively used when they visited our house. I opened the mirrored medicine cabinet. There were several orange prescription pill bottles belonging to Margaret. I picked one up, turning it in the light, and read the label. Margaret Caldwell. Take 1 tablet daily for cardiac regulation. The name of the heavy medication printed on the white label was digoxin, the generic brand name for digitalis. Clara had been systematically stealing her own mother's heart medication every time they visited. She had been taking the pills that were meant to keep her mother alive, crushing them down, and using them to slowly murder her husband. And last night, in a twist of poetic, horrifying justice, she had given a lethal overdose to her own mother using her own medicine. The absolute, unadulterated evil of it took my breath away. I closed the medicine cabinet. I had the motive. I had the weapon. I had the financial records. Now I needed the undeniable confession, and I knew exactly how to force her to give it to me. 3 excruciating, agonizing days passed after the catastrophic Thanksgiving dinner. Margaret miraculously survived the initial violent shock to her cardiovascular system. The exhausted doctors at Memorial Hospital, completely unaware of the malicious, premeditated intent behind her sudden collapse, concluded that she had suffered a severe, unexplained adverse reaction to a combination of her existing medications and a possible undiagnosed dietary allergy. They adjusted her daily prescriptions, gave Arthur a stern warning about monitoring her resting heart rate, and finally signed the discharge papers. Throughout those 3 days, Clara was absolutely glowing with a sickening, toxic kind of confidence. She walked around the hospital corridors and our home with a renewed spring in her step. In her twisted, narcissistic mind, she had successfully navigated the ultimate crisis. She had inadvertently poisoned her own mother, watched her nearly die on the expensive hardwood floor of the dining room, and walked away completely and utterly unscathed. No police cruisers were called to investigate the scene. No hard-nosed detectives knocked on our front door to ask uncomfortable questions. The highly paid hospital staff simply chalked it up to a terrifying medical anomaly. She thought she was invincible. She truly believed she had beaten the system. Most importantly, she thought I was still just the blind, hard-working, utterly clueless husband who was far too busy drawing commercial blueprints to notice his own impending murder. I played my part perfectly. I had to. It took every single ounce of my willpower to maintain the facade. If I showed even a fraction of the cold, simmering rage that was boiling in my veins every time she touched my arm or called me honey, she would have tipped off Liam. They would have immediately liquidated whatever remaining funds they had stashed in their offshore accounts and vanished into thin air, leaving me with nothing but a mountain of fraudulent debt and a broken life. I needed her to feel incredibly comfortable. I needed her to feel like she was the smartest, most cunning person in the room. That is the ultimate, fatal weakness of narcissists. Their supreme overconfidence is the exact weapon you can use to completely destroy them. On the crisp Tuesday morning, Margaret was finally scheduled to go home. I put on my best tailored charcoal suit and carefully packed my leatherwork briefcase. I walked into our modern kitchen where Clara was happily humming a cheerful pop tune, pouring herself a cup of expensive organic green tea. "Honey," I said, keeping my voice incredibly soft, measured, and highly apologetic. "I am so incredibly sorry, but I absolutely cannot go with you to pick up your mother from the hospital today. Mr. Sterling just called an emergency meeting at the firm. We are dealing with a massive, multi-million-dollar corporate lawsuit regarding the commercial zoning of his new luxury real estate project. My entire yearly salary, my annual bonus, and my upcoming promotion to senior partner entirely hinge on keeping this client happy. I have to be at the office." Clara turned around slowly, a look of manufactured, rehearsed disappointment painted on her face, but I could clearly see the genuine, undeniable relief dancing in her icy blue eyes. "Oh, Ethan, you work far too much," she sighed, shaking her head. "Mom really wanted you there to help her into the car. But I understand. Providing for our financial future is important. We need the money for the country club renewals anyway. I will handle the hospital discharge and get her settled comfortably at the house." "Could you do me a huge favor?" I asked, looking directly into her lying eyes, forcing a warm smile. Her cardiologist texted me the updated prescription list this morning. Can you pick up her new heart medications from the pharmacy on your way to your parents' house? I want to make sure she has exactly what she needs the second she walks through the door. Of course, sweetie, she smiled brightly, walking over and giving me a gentle, sickening peck on the cheek. Her expensive perfume turned my stomach. I will take care of absolutely everything. You just focus on your big real estate meeting and securing that promotion. I walked out the front door, got into my sedan, and drove exactly 3 blocks away. I pulled into a vacant strip mall parking lot, parked behind a large dumpster, turned off the engine, and waited. I did not go to the office. There was no emergency meeting with Mr. Sterling. There was no corporate lawsuit crisis. There was only the final act of a devastating play I was directing from the shadows. I waited exactly 45 minutes, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. Finally, I watched Clara's gleaming white luxury SUV pull out of our driveway and head toward the main highway. I gave her a generous 2-mile lead, then pulled out and followed her at a very safe distance. She drove straight to the high-end, boutique pharmacy located in the most affluent part of town. I watched from across the busy street as she confidently walked inside, emerging 15 minutes later with a large white paper bag filled with orange pill bottles. She got back into her vehicle and drove directly to Arthur and Margaret's sprawling, multi-million-dollar gated estate. I parked my car 2 streets over, carefully hiding it behind a thick, manicured row of tall cedar trees bordering the neighborhood golf course. I knew the exact layout of Arthur's massive house perfectly. I had spent enough miserable, degrading holidays there, silently enduring their relentless insults about my salary and my background, to know every single entrance, every long hallway, and every security camera blind spot. I walked briskly through the heavily wooded backyard, staying low to avoid the main motion sensors. I used the spare brass key hidden under the heavy stone planter box on the back patio to unlock the heavy glass door leading into their lavish sunroom. The house was relatively quiet, but not empty. I slipped off my leather dress shoes, leaving them tucked behind a potted plant by the door, and moved silently in my socks across the imported Italian marble floors. I could hear the faint, echoing murmur of voices coming from the massive formal living room at the front of the house. Margaret was clearly resting on the custom velvet sofa, while Arthur was pacing the floor, loudly complaining on his cell phone about a sudden dip in his retirement stock portfolio and threatening his broker. I crept silently up the grand, sweeping mahogany staircase, sticking to the very edge of the wooden steps where the floorboards were least likely to creak. I navigated the long, thickly carpeted upstairs hallway and slipped quietly into the spacious guest bedroom directly adjacent to the upstairs bathroom. This was the specific bathroom Clara's parents exclusively used. The bathroom where the digitalis was always kept in the mirrored medicine cabinet. I left the heavy wooden bedroom door open just a fraction of an inch. I pulled out my smartphone, double-checked the battery life, and switched it completely to silent mode, disabling all notifications. I tapped my smartwatch, navigating to the hidden, high-definition voice recorder application I had installed the night before. I stood completely still in the dark room, my heart pounding a slow, deliberate, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I was a hunter waiting patiently for the prey to step directly onto the steel trap. 10 agonizing minutes passed, then 20. The silence in the upstairs hallway was deafening. I began to intensely second-guess myself. Maybe she wouldn't do it today. Maybe the sheer shock of her mother's near-death experience had delayed her murderous plans. Maybe she was going to wait another week or a month before trying again. Then I heard it. The heavy, familiar, rhythmic click of Clara's designer heels striking the hardwood floor at the top of the stairs. She was walking down the hallway. She was actually humming. She was humming the exact same cheerful, upbeat pop tune she had been humming in our kitchen that very morning. She walked right past the dark room I was hiding in and stepped confidently into the guest bathroom. The door clicked shut behind her, but she did not lock it. She felt completely secure in her childhood home. I held my breath. I listened with every single ounce of focus I possessed. First came the sharp, unmistakable plastic clicking sound of a child-proof pill bottle being pushed down and twisted open. Then, the soft, scattering rattle of small pills being poured out onto the smooth marble countertop. And then came the sound I had been waiting for. The heavy, brutal, grinding scrape of stone against stone. She was using a heavy granite mortar and pestle that Margaret used for crushing decorative soaps. She was crushing the pills. She was meticulously preparing the next fatal dose. She simply couldn't wait. With her massive offshore gambling debts piling up, the violent loan sharks aggressively circling, and her financial advisor lover Liam waiting impatiently in the wings for the insurance payout, she was absolutely desperate to finish the bloody job she started on Thanksgiving. She needed her husband dead, and she needed it done quickly before the creditors seized our assets. I pressed the record button on my smartwatch. A tiny red light blinked to life, capturing the harsh, undeniable grinding noise echoing loudly from the bathroom. I pulled out my phone, switched the camera to video mode, and hit record. I pushed the bedroom door open. I walked silently across the hallway. I did not hesitate. I did not shake. I raised my phone, pointing the lens squarely ahead, and pushed the bathroom door wide open. Clara spun around violently, letting out a sharp, terrified gasp of pure shock. In her right hand, she gripped the heavy granite pestle tightly. On the pristine marble counter directly in front of her sat the granite mortar, filled entirely with a fine, perfectly crushed white powder. Scattered haphazardly around the stone bowl were several small, orange prescription pill bottles. The prominent white label on the closest bottle clearly and undeniably read, Digoxin. We stared at each other in the harsh, bright, unforgiving vanity lighting of the bathroom. The silence stretched between us, thick, heavy, and suffocating. The carefully crafted mask of the loving, devoted, high society wife completely shattered, falling to the floor in a million irreparable pieces. Her face went completely blank, the blood draining rapidly from her cheeks, leaving her looking like a ghost. Ethan? What are you doing here? She whispered, her voice trembling violently. Her eyes darted frantically from my cold face to the smartphone in my hand. The camera lens pointed directly at her and the crushed poison. You are supposed to be at the office. You told me you had an emergency meeting regarding the commercial real estate lawsuit. You are supposed to be with Mr. Sterling. The meeting was miraculously canceled, I said, my voice incredibly calm, cold, and flat as a concrete slab. What exactly are you doing, Clara? She swallowed hard, her throat bobbing as she desperately tried to rebuild the shattered lie, trying to salvage the horrific situation. She forced a rigid, entirely unconvincing, trembling smile onto her pale lips. I am just organizing Mom's new pills, making sure her new prescriptions from the hospital are sorted properly for the week. You know how forgetful she gets with her medication schedule. With a heavy granite mortar and pestle? I asked, stepping fully into the bathroom, strategically blocking the only doorway so she could not escape. Since when does organizing daily medication require manually grinding it into a fine, dissolvable powder? Her knuckles turned stark white around the stone pestle. She took a tiny, defensive step backward, her back bumping hard into the large vanity mirror. Some of the new pills are very large, Ethan. They are incredibly hard for her to swallow. Her throat is very sore from the breathing tubes at the hospital. The cardiologist recommended I crush them so she can easily mix them with applesauce or soup. I am just trying to help my sick mother. Ethan, why on earth are you filming me? Put that phone away. Stop acting crazy. That is a truly brilliant lie, I said, never lowering the phone an inch, keeping her squarely in the frame. You have always been an exceptional, pathological liar, Clara. But that is not what you are doing. You are not crushing medication to help your mother. You are crushing it to kill your husband. Her expression shifted violently. The initial fear completely morphed into something incredibly dark, nasty, and feral. The true Clara, the greedy, entitled woman who had systematically drained my life savings, destroyed our college fund, and slowly poisoned my body for 6 consecutive months, finally clawed her way to the surface. "I don't know what the hell you are talking about, Ethan," she spat viciously, setting the pestle down heavily on the counter with a loud clack. "Put the damn phone away. You are invading my parents' privacy in their own home. Get out of this bathroom right now before I scream for my father and have him throw you out on the street. You put a massive, lethal dose of digitalis in my chicken noodle soup on Thanksgiving," I said, my voice echoing loudly off the expensive tile walls. I delivered the words slowly, clearly, like a federal judge reading a final, unalterable sentence. "But you were too busy laughing at your father's jokes to see me watching you do it. I waited until your brother and father were distracted by the crying children, and I swiftly swapped my poisoned bowl with Margaret's clean one. Your mother ate your poison. You almost murdered the woman who gave birth to you." Her jaw clenched so tightly I legitimately thought her teeth would crack under the pressure. Her breathing became incredibly ragged and shallow. "That is absolutely insane. You have completely lost your mind. You are a paranoid schizophrenic. You have absolutely no proof of anything. It's your word against mine, and my family will destroy you in court." "I have the soup," I replied smoothly, leaning against the doorframe. "I collected the leftover toxic broth in a sealed container while you were crying your fake, crocodile tears over your dying mother. I had it scientifically tested by my brother Marcus at the State Medical Toxicology Lab. The certified report shows lethal, undeniable levels of digitalis. The exact same highly restricted medication you are grinding into a powder on that counter right now. The exact medication you have been stealing from this very medicine cabinet for 6 months to slowly murder me." She went completely, terrifyingly still. All the arrogant bravado vanished into thin air. She realized, with crushing clarity, that she was totally trapped. She realized the blue-collar architect she had treated like absolute garbage for 5 years had completely and utterly outsmarted her. "You can't prove anything?" she hissed, taking a threatening step toward me. Her hands balled into tight fists. "Any decent defense lawyer will tear that ridiculous story apart. You stole evidence from a scene. You tampered with it. It will never hold up in a court of law. I will sue you for defamation." "I don't just have the soup, Clara," I said, smiling for the first time. It was not a kind smile. "I have the financial records. I meticulously recovered your deleted emails. I have the official bank statements showing the $200,000 you lost to illegal offshore gambling sites. I have the vicious emails from the loan sharks threatening your life and our property. And, most importantly, I have the fraudulent $2 million life insurance policy you secretly took out on me behind my back, specifically containing the double payout clause for accidental poisoning." Her eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated terror. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. "I also have your disgusting, intimate emails with Liam," I added, dropping the final, crushing anvil onto her chest. "Your wonderful financial advisor. Your secret lover. The man who forged my signature and helped you plan my execution. I have absolutely everything, Clara. It is entirely over. You are going to state prison for the rest of your natural life." The mention of Liam was the absolute breaking point. The devastating realization that her perfect, airtight plan was completely dismantled, that her secret lover was exposed, and that she was facing decades behind iron bars, completely shattered her sanity. Something primal, desperate, and incredibly violent snapped behind her eyes. "You pathetic piece of trash!" she screamed at the absolute top of her lungs, her voice echoing through the massive house. She lunged at me with the ferocity of a cornered animal. She didn't go for the phone. She went straight for my face. Her long, expensive acrylic nails raked aggressively across my left cheek, tearing the skin and drawing blood instantly. She kicked wildly at my shins, screaming incoherently, throwing her entire body weight against my chest. I quickly stepped back, caught her wrists, and twisted them firmly but carefully, making absolutely sure the camera on my phone captured every single second of her unhinged, violent physical assault. "Get off me. You are nothing. You are a nobody. I wish you had eaten it, she shrieked, struggling violently against my iron grip. The heavy, chaotic commotion was impossible to ignore. Footsteps thundered rapidly and heavily up the wooden stairs. Arthur and Julian burst into the upstairs hallway, their faces pale with intense alarm. They rushed to the bathroom door, stopping dead in their tracks at the shocking sight of me, firmly holding Clara's wrists while she thrashed and screamed like a wild banshee. "Ethan, what the hell are you doing to my daughter?" Arthur roared, his face turning a deep, dangerous shade of purple. "Let her go right this second, or I swear to God I will kill you with my bare hands." I shoved Clara firmly backward. She stumbled, hitting her lower back hard against the marble counter, but she quickly recovered her footing. She immediately burst into violent, theatrical tears, collapsing dramatically onto the tiled floor and burying her face in her trembling hands. "Dad, Julian, thank God you're here," she sobbed hysterically, pointing a shaking, accusatory finger directly at me. "He attacked me. He followed me here, sneaked into the house, and cornered me. He is insane. He admitted it, Dad. He admitted he was the one who poisoned Mom's soup on Thanksgiving. He is trying to frame me for it to steal my inheritance." Julian stepped aggressively forward, his fists balled tightly at his sides, clearly ready to swing at my jaw. "I knew it," he snarled, stepping protectively between me and his sister. "I always knew you were a greedy psycho. You always hated us because you were poor. You tried to murder my mother, and now you are putting your hands on my sister in our own home. I am calling the police right now. You are going to rot in a jail cell, you arrogant prick." "I already called them, Julian," I said calmly, casually wiping a drop of warm blood from my scratched cheek. "They are waiting at the end of your driveway. I told them to give me exactly 5 minutes to secure the physical evidence before they came inside." Julian froze, his hand hovering awkwardly over the smartphone in his pocket. Arthur looked utterly confused, stepping cautiously into the bathroom and looking around the bright room. His eyes landed squarely on the granite mortar and pestle, the finely crushed white powder, and the scattered orange pill bottles on the counter. "What is all this?" Arthur demanded, his booming voice dropping an octave as confusion set in. "Clara, why on earth are your mother's heart pills crushed up on the counter?" "He did that," Clara screamed, her voice cracking with wild desperation. "He set this whole thing up. He brought them in here to make me look guilty. He wants to force a divorce and ruin our family name." "Arthur," I said, cutting sharply through her hysterical screaming with a voice of absolute, undeniable authority. "Look at me. Look me in the eyes. Have I ever, in the 5 years I have been married to your daughter, asked you for a single dime? Have I ever asked for a handout, a loan, or a favor? No. I pay for everything. I built my own career from the ground up. Your precious daughter, on the other hand, is drowning in over $200,000 of illegal gambling debt. She has stolen my salary, completely wiped out our future children's college fund, and fraudulently taken out a $2 million life insurance policy on my life. She was crushing those pills to put them in my dinner tonight, just like she did on Thanksgiving." "That is a lie. That is a disgusting, fabricated lie," Clara shrieked from the floor, but her voice lacked any real conviction. She was panicking, looking wildly between her father and her brother, realizing they were actually listening to me. Arthur looked closely at the pill bottles. He picked one up with a shaking hand. These are the missing digoxin bottles. Margaret's doctor called and said she needed an emergency refill because she went through them far too fast. I thought she just misplaced them." "She didn't misplace them, Arthur," I said, my voice relentless. "Clara has been stealing them every time we visit. She has been grinding them up and secretly feeding them to me in my tea and soup. I have been suffering from severe digitalis poisoning for half a year. That is exactly why I was always sick, losing weight, and having heart palpitations. On Thanksgiving, I finally saw her slip the deadly powder into my bowl. I waited until you were all distracted by Julian's kids knocking over a chair, and I swapped my bowl with Margaret's. I survived. Your wife almost died. Arthur's face completely drained of all color. He stumbled backward, clutching the wooden doorframe for physical support. He looked down in horror at his daughter, who was still cowering on the tile floor. "You!" Arthur whispered, his voice trembling with devastating heartbreak. "You fed your own mother poison? You almost killed my wife." "Dad, no. Don't listen to him. He has manipulated the documents," Clara begged, crawling pathetically toward his shoes. But I wasn't finished. I had to deliver the final, crushing blow to the Caldwell empire. "You want to know the absolute best part, Arthur?" I asked, pulling a thick stack of printed documents from the inside pocket of my suit jacket and tossing them onto the floor right in front of him. She wasn't working alone. She had professional help orchestrating the financial fraud. Liam, your trusted, highly paid financial advisor. The man who actively manages your entire retirement portfolio and controls Julian's massive trust fund. He is her lover. They were planning to kill me, collect the $2 million, and leave the country together. I have all their emails. I have the forged insurance documents. You might want to check your own accounts, Arthur. Julian's mouth dropped wide open. The mention of Liam struck a massive, terrifying chord in the room. Liam controlled all their money. Liam knew all their dirty financial secrets, the tax loopholes, the hidden assets. Liam! Julian choked out, his inherent arrogance completely evaporating, replaced instantly by sheer, unadulterated financial terror. She is sleeping with Liam? Right at that exact moment, the heavy, authoritative sound of police boots echoed up the wooden stairs. Detective Hayes, a seasoned, no-nonsense investigator I had met with the previous day to officially hand over the encrypted flash drive and the certified toxicology report, walked down the hallway. He was accompanied by two large, uniformed police officers with their hands resting on their utility belts. "Ethan Caldwell?" Detective Hayes asked, stepping into the doorway, his sharp eyes sweeping over the chaotic scene, analyzing the crushed pills, the scattered bottles, and Clara weeping on the floor. "Yes, Detective," I said politely, stepping aside and handing him my smartphone. "I have the entire confrontation recorded on high-definition video, including her unprovoked physical assault on me. You already have the certified medical lab results, the financial records, and the communications proving the conspiracy with Liam." Detective Hayes nodded grimly, taking the phone and slipping it into an evidence bag. He looked down at Clara with a look of pure disgust. "Clara Caldwell, stand up. You are under arrest for the premeditated attempted murder of Ethan Caldwell, the attempted murder of Margaret Caldwell, and multiple counts of severe financial fraud and conspiracy." Clara screamed. It wasn't a fake, theatrical scream. It was a raw, guttural, agonizing howl of absolute defeat. She fought the officers wildly as they pulled her roughly to her feet, twisting her arms forcefully behind her back and snapping the heavy, cold steel handcuffs onto her wrists. "Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far. You're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey." The uniformed officers forcefully dragged Clara out of the bathroom. She was kicking the walls, spitting, and cursing at me with language I had never heard her use, her pristine high society image completely and utterly destroyed. I followed them slowly down the grand sweeping staircase, Arthur and Julian trailing behind in absolute, stunned, horrifying silence. As they hauled her out the heavy oak front door and pushed her aggressively into the back of a waiting black and white police cruiser, Julian finally snapped out of his deep state of shock. His inherent, lifelong arrogance, the deeply ingrained belief that his family's immense wealth could buy their way out of any problem, flared up one last time. He marched confidently down the driveway, right up to Detective Hayes, puffing out his chest and pointing an aggressive finger. "Listen here, Detective," Julian demanded, his voice dripping with condescension. "You are making a massive, career-ending mistake. My family retains the absolute best defense lawyers in this entire state. We are going to bury your department in endless civil rights lawsuits. You cannot just arrest my sister, a respected member of this community, based on the fabricated evidence of a disgruntled, poor husband who is just bitter about a divorce. Detective Hayes stopped writing in his leather-bound notepad. He slowly closed it, tucked it into his breast pocket, and looked up at Julian. A cold, highly unimpressed, almost pitying smile formed on the detective's lips. I wouldn't be throwing legal threats around if I were you, Julian, Detective Hayes said, his voice calm but carrying the heavy weight of the law. We have already secured a federal warrant to thoroughly audit your personal bank accounts, your business holdings, and the entirety of your massive trust fund. Your good friend Liam is currently being apprehended by federal agents at the International Airport Terminal as we speak. He was attempting to board a one-way flight to the Cayman Islands with a duffel bag stuffed with untraceable cash. During his preliminary interrogation at the airport holding room, he heavily implied that you were fully aware of Clara's massive gambling debts and that you actively helped her hide money from the IRS to protect the family name. The feds will be calling you very, very soon. Julian's face instantly went completely white, matching the color of his designer shirt. He literally staggered backward on the concrete driveway as if he had been physically punched in the gut by a heavyweight fighter. The loud threat of a civil lawsuit evaporated instantly, replaced by the terrifying, very real reality of federal prison for tax evasion and conspiracy. He turned around without making eye contact with anyone and walked quickly back into the house, completely abandoning his sister to her fate, his own personal empire crumbling around him. Arthur stood alone on the front porch, trembling violently in the cool afternoon breeze. He looked incredibly old. He looked entirely broken. The powerful, domineering patriarch who had spent 5 years ruthlessly insulting my background, mocking my career, and treating me like a peasant, was completely destroyed. He slowly walked down the stone steps toward me, his shoulders slumped. "Ethan?" Arthur whispered, his voice severely cracking, hot tears streaming freely down his wrinkled cheeks. I am so incredibly sorry. We were completely blind. We treated you terribly. We judged you and we were wrong. You saved Margaret's life tonight by stopping Clara. Please, I am begging you, tell me what we can do to fix this nightmare. We can hire the best lawyers for you to handle the divorce. We can give you a massive settlement. Whatever you need. I looked at him. I searched my heart, and I felt absolutely nothing. No pity for his tears, no anger for his past insults, no sadness for the destruction of the family. Just a profound, liberating, beautiful emptiness. You cannot fix this with a checkbook, Arthur, I said quietly, adjusting the cuffs of my suit jacket. You created her. You and Margaret enabled her extreme entitlement. You taught her, from the day she was born, that people like me are disposable, that our lives simply don't matter as long as your family maintains its pristine public image. I don't want a single dime of your dirty money. I don't want your high-priced lawyers. I just want you, your son, and your murderous daughter out of my life permanently. Do not ever contact me again. I didn't wait for his response. I turned my back on the sprawling mansion, walked briskly to my car hidden safely down the street, and drove away. I drove straight back to my own house. I grabbed 3 large suitcases and methodically packed my clothes, my vital architectural blueprints, and my laptop. I intentionally left the expensive luxury furniture, the overpriced modern art we bought together, and the keys to her SUV sitting on the kitchen counter. I walked out the front door, got into my car, and drove to a modest hotel downtown. I met with a ruthless attorney and filed for a highly contested, aggressive divorce the very next morning, armed with a mountain of criminal evidence. The wheels of the criminal justice system turn incredibly slowly, grinding down everything in their path, but when they finally crush you, the weight is absolute and inescapable. 6 months later, I sat quietly in the back row of a packed, heavily guarded state courtroom. The criminal trial had become a massive media spectacle, dominating the local news cycles due to the extreme wealth of the Caldwell family, the betrayal of the financial advisor, and the incredibly shocking, cold-blooded nature of the poisoning. Clara's expensive, high-powered defense lawyers tried absolutely everything in their vast arsenal to discredit me. They ruthlessly tried to paint me on the stand as a paranoid, financially abusive husband who drove his wife to despair. They tried to argue that I had somehow poisoned Margaret myself to frame Clara and steal her inheritance. They even brought in highly paid experts to claim Clara was suffering from a severe psychological break due to my emotional neglect. But the evidence I had meticulously gathered was insurmountable. It was an absolute, crushing avalanche of undeniable proof. The chemical signature of the digitalis found in the Thanksgiving soup matched her mother's specific prescription perfectly. The heavy granite mortar and pestle seized from the bathroom were completely covered in Clara's fingerprints and microscopic traces of the deadly poison. The high-definition audio and video recordings captured her complete, terrified confession and her violent, unhinged physical assault on me. The forensic financial records proved her massive gambling debts, the fraudulent $2 million life insurance policy, and her romantic affair with Liam beyond a shadow of a doubt. And finally, the nail in the coffin. My brother Marcus confidently took the stand. He presented a massive stack of my medical records from the past 6 months, expertly cross-referenced with blood samples he had secretly saved from my initial visit. He proved to the jury, undeniably and scientifically, that I had been slowly poisoned over a long period, mapping my symptoms exactly to Clara's timeline of stealing the medication. The jury deliberated for exactly 2 hours. They returned to the courtroom and delivered a verdict of guilty on all major counts. The judge, looking down at Clara from the bench with absolute disgust, delivered a scathing speech about her greed and lack of humanity. He sentenced her to 25 years to life in a maximum security state prison, with absolutely no possibility of early parole. Liam, who had quickly flipped and testified against Clara in a desperate, cowardly attempt to save himself, still received a harsh 15-year sentence in federal prison for conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, and massive financial embezzlement. As the armed bailiffs clamped the heavy iron shackles onto Clara's wrists to physically lead her away to a cell, she stopped and looked back at me sitting in the gallery. She looked completely hollow, aged by 10 years, and utterly terrified. There was no more arrogance, no more fake sweetness. She expected me to gloat. She expected me to smile or show anger. But I just looked right through her, treating her like a ghost. I turned around, pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom, and walked out into the bright, warm sunlight. My professional and personal life changed dramatically after that day. The massive corporate lawsuit regarding the commercial real estate project was resolved perfectly, and my client, Mr. Sterling, was so incredibly impressed by my absolute focus and dedication to my work while under extreme personal pressure, that he offered me a full partnership at his own global development firm. My salary tripled overnight. I bought a beautiful, modern penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city skyline, paying for it entirely with my own hard-earned money. More importantly, I rebuilt my life with the people who actually mattered. Marcus and I started having dinner together every single Sunday without fail. We talked, we argued about sports, we laughed, and we fully healed the old wounds that had kept us apart. He had quite literally saved my life with his brilliant scientific mind and his unwavering, fierce loyalty, and I made sure he knew exactly how much I loved and respected him. I am 35 years old now. I am completely single. I don't date much, and I probably won't trust easily for a very long time, if ever again. The psychological scars from that kind of profound, intimate betrayal run deep into the bone. But I am alive. I am incredibly successful. I am completely free from the suffocating toxicity of a family that valued social status and money over human life. Sometimes, late at night, I sit alone at my expensive dining table overlooking the city lights. I heat up a simple bowl of chicken noodle soup. I look at the steam rising from the golden broth. I think about that terrifying Thanksgiving dinner. I think about the split second when I saw her hand move over my bowl, the exact moment I decided to stay quiet, to suppress my panic, and to be smarter than the devil sitting right next to me. Some people, even some of the detectives on the case, told me I should have just jumped up, knocked the bowl over, and called the police immediately. Maybe they are right. Maybe it would have been safer in the short term. But I knew in my gut that without absolute, undeniable physical proof, her wealthy family would have completely crushed me in court. I needed her to spring her own trap. I needed the hard evidence. And I got it. That quiet, terrifying decision is what kept me alive and put her behind bars. It wasn't blind luck. It wasn't chance. It was one choice to fight back intelligently. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. I hope my experience serves as a stark, powerful warning to anyone watching. Never ignore the quiet red flags in your relationship. Never let anyone, no matter how wealthy, powerful, or connected they seem, make you feel like you are worth less than them. And most importantly, always trust your deepest gut instincts. If you feel like something is horribly wrong in your home, observe, gather evidence, and protect yourself at all costs. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family or a partner you trusted completely? Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic environment or fight for your life to save your own future? Share your story in the comments below. We read every single one, and this community is here to support you without judgment. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. Stay safe, trust your instincts, and take care of yourselves.